Hi, I'm Steve Kepp, co-founder of From Day One, our forum on corporate values. Welcome to today's webinar. We're excited about this topic, looking at whole company strategies to meet ambitious sustainability goals and how HR and ESG leaders can help. Before we get started, I want to share something special we have for today's attendees. One of our monthly virtual conferences is coming up on Wednesday, February 16th, and it's titled Beyond Diversity, Bringing Substance to Inclusion and Belonging. It's going to be particularly valuable for employers who are embracing their increasing diversity in order to sustain a sense of belonging among their employees. Thanks to our partners, including today's sponsor, we have some complimentary VIP tickets available for those who've joined today's webinar. That's you. I'm putting a link in the chat right now. You'll want to take advantage of this one because the regular price for our conference tickets is $149. And this link will give you a free VIP ticket for the whole day's activities. Now today, we'll be exploring the topic of making sustainability part of your corporate culture. As more companies make pledges toward net zero emissions, they'll need whole company strategies to meet those ambitious goals. How can HR and ESG leaders marshal the resources in their organizations to create a culture of innovation and urgency about changing how their companies do business? What practices are in play at the companies that have moved most quickly toward those goals and of net zero? Our sponsor today is Salesforce. I'll tell you a bit about them. Salesforce, the global CRM leader, empowers companies of every size and industry to digitally transform and create a 360-degree view of their customers. Now, before we get started, a few quick logistical items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand soon after the event. So you can look out for an email in about 24 hours with the link. That email will also have information how you can get professional development credits for this session from both the Society of Human Resource Management and the HR Certification Institute. You can also look out for a written account of the conversation on our website at fromdayone.co. Now, for the audience, about 45 minutes into the webinar, we'll have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions anytime they occur to you using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Eric Roston. Eric is sustainability editor of Bloomberg News, as well as a former member of Time Magazine's Washington Bureau. He was a senior analyst for the White House Commission investigating the 2010 Gulf of Mexico oil spill, and he's consulted for the U.S. Department of State as a climate change expert. His book, The Carbon Age, was published by Bloomsbury USA. Okay, Eric, take it away.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for everyone in attendance and to the panelists who are now going to introduce yourselves. It's a really, really interesting time to be talking about ESG, which is it's just one of these deeply arcane acronyms to really hit the big time. You know, a little bit like your after school softball buddy making it to the World Series. It's really gone through a wormhole of interest in the last few years, and I'd just like to first ask our panelists to introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit from your perspective, what is ESG? And what's it been like to sort of watch this acceleration happen in the last 2 or 3 years, even through the pandemic? Sonia, would you like to go first?
Thanks, Eric. It's a pleasure to be with everyone and all of the panelists. Wow, big question. What is ESG? So I oversee ESG strategy, engagement, and reporting at Salesforce. And from the corporate ESG perspective, I would say I think about corporate ESG as figuring out how your business model can transform to align with the needs of the planet and society and to thrive over the long term. So there's that long-term perspective and that stakeholder perspective of how do you create value for, of course, your investors if you're a public company, but also your employees, your customers, your partners, again, communities and the planet.
2 years into Zoom, I'm still missing the mute button. Nicole, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us here today. Excited to be here to talk about this because we're literally in the midst of how do you really embed this within your corporate culture. And I think what Sonia mentioned about what ESG is very much how we think about it too, right? It's exactly how how we are at AT&T, how's our long-term business success inextricably linked with our communities, right? And we need a thriving, healthy communities for a thriving and healthy business. So those are symbiotic relationships. And for us, the ESG, I agree that we've had a little bit of an identity crisis in this field of work. We've never really named ourselves well. There's CSR, there's ESG, there's citizenship and sustainability, there's sustainability on its own. So for us, we really look at ESG as that's the financial language, right? It's what we use with our investors. It's how they understand this space, and CSR is the larger umbrella where that all sits within. I agree that it's been a really exciting time over the last couple of years to be in this field of work. It feels very much, I think all of us are entrepreneurs within our company. So oftentimes it's kind of Sisyphusian work that we do. We're pushing boulders up hills. And I think in this last time, everyone has kind of woken up to what this is. So it's a lot of when opportunity meets preparation, and you're there and you find yourself in this space. And thankfully, we've done the work to get our corporations where they are today. But it's been an exciting time, if a bit overwhelming, but exciting. So thanks for having me.
Before we go any further, I should also point out what ESG actually means. And it's an acronym that came out of the part of the investment community many years ago. Stands for environmental, social, and governance issues. And the thing that drives me personally crazy about it is that environment and social are both adjectives and governance is a noun. And so it's not only this weird acronym, it's a mashup of just kind of parts of speech that don't belong together, but I've said too much. Noel Anderson, no relation to Nicole. What's your take on all this?
Hey, thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Noel Anderson with the American Red Cross, and I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer and Vice President of ESG Strategy. You know, for us, it's about communicating to our stakeholders that our sense of responsibility to the communities we serve, it goes beyond just the mission that we're delivering. You know, we're also going to be environmentally responsible to do our part to reduce the impacts of climate change. We're going to be socially responsible, including DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout our organization and our mission. And we're going to continue to be responsible in our business practices.
Great, thank you. Byron, want to tell us about Organon?
Absolutely, thank you. And it's good to be here. I agree with all my colleagues here. ESG, interestingly enough, it's a little bit different from how Nicole described it at AT&T. For us, we say ESG is a kind of overarching description of how we describe our non-financial performance from a technical point of view, but also our how we engage our stakeholders. But CSR falls underneath ESG for us, so it's kind of the other way around. Organon is a new company. It's a new pharmaceutical company that spun off of Merck, or MSD as it's known outside the United States. We are a pharmaceutical company founded on purpose. And so ESG and our ESG strategy really describes how we want to execute against that purpose. Although we are less than 7 months old, we've developed an ESG strategy. We went through a materiality assessment, which is just a technical prioritization process where we look at all our relevant critical ESG issues and prioritize them with various stakeholders. And we had that approved by our executive leadership team and our board of directors, who are really passionate as our employees are about ESG and corporate responsibility. The one piece that I'll say that for corporate responsibility for us is really describes how we do philanthropy and employee volunteerism. So that's kind of the more quote unquote traditional functions or expectations around how we're a good corporate citizen in society.
I think that's a really important point, and I want to come back to that after we hear from Dawn, who I kind of saved for last because I thought you had a very interesting take on, or at least some of the work you described in our prior conversation really goes to the heart of the origins of ESG, and that's people outside the company wanting information from the company that it doesn't disclose. And there's been so many years now of companies being asked by outside stakeholders and investors how they're performing on different metrics. It seems like, Dawn, at Lincoln Financial, you've really let ESG necessity be the mother of invention on how you're dealing with all that.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I feel like you might have teed this up directly for me, so thank you. I can't add to the definitions that my peer panelists have described. I agree with all of them. It's an evolving space for sure. Lincoln Financial, I'm proud to say, has been really committed to the sustainability piece of ESG as it's been evolving. As early as 2011, we set up a CSR team. As early as 2012, we instituted a sustainability advisory group of senior business leaders from across the enterprise. And then just to back that up, in 2014, we set our first GHG reduction targets and submitted to CDP. I give that by way of example that this is a long term and it's definitely evolving and it's definitely getting rapid.
Having defined ESG, there's probably, it's a real acronym soup, this space. Don, can you tell us what CDP stands for, what it is, and if anyone else has other favorite acronyms, please jump in after Don.
Yeah, apologies. This is definitely an acronym heavy space. Carbon Disclosure Project. Many of us report to that. It is the go-to for environmental footprint work, and it's most of it is public, and a lot of the rest of the market looks to CDP data to see how our trends are in terms of our environmental footprint.
Anyone else for SASB or IIRC, or maybe if they come up later, we can go into it. And so everyone does come at this with a common set of definitions, but it's also, I've always found in my work it to be a highly local problem. What is sustainability? And so I wonder if each of you, like given each of your institutions, like is there one thing that is specifically sustainability for you that is not for anyone else on the call? Maybe not.
You know, Eric,
maybe to pick on either Nicole or Byron. I mean, Nicole, a lot AT&T's work, as I understand it, really looks at your product and your networks and looks at how that can solve the digital divide. Or Byron, you're specifically geared at in the women's health space. So I guess my goal in asking the question is how, by discovering what sustainability and ESG means for you, can you help our viewers in the audience try to articulate what it might be for them?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it, Byron, and you can chime in and correct what I say. So I think for us, it's definitely our business is about connectivity, as you said, right? So for over a century, AT&T has been about connecting folks and making that service universally available. And so it's a very clear, then direct line for how we would authentically show up in a community or in the CSR space would be tied directly to our business and would be about bridging the digital divide. So really looking at who doesn't have internet access, who needs it, and how do we make that happen and how do we facilitate that? And then also for our climate goals, so our carbon neutral goal, it's under the underpinning of that, right? We're working on our own network space, but we're also putting out products and climate solutions through our technology, through 5G and fiber and broadband that help other companies hit their carbon neutral goals. So for us, I would say the through thread, everything is around broadband. So as I talk about it as broadband for good, if we're going to be the best broadband network by 2025, then naturally our CSR should show up and how we connect that broadband to our communities.
Thanks. Audio was a little bumpy, but we got it. We got the message. Byron, any thoughts there?
No, you're absolutely right. And I was when you said the word local, I didn't know if you meant like geographically or kind of local.
No. I'm sorry. I meant local to your organization.
Yeah, no, and actually, I'll answer from both the kind of local geography actually does matter, and then local to our industry matters, and I really kind of I'll talk about it from a pharmaceutical perspective. I mentioned doing a materiality assessment, which I think is best practice for any company, and what that what's so helpful about that process is that you really understand what are the most material issues facing your business and or ESG issues that are facing your business. And for the pharmaceutical industry, um, uh, for all of us in this industry is around access to medicines and access to health. And so that is a top priority for us. And, there's a lot of sub issues underneath that. Um, some of I'll talk about it in outside of women's health, but in pharma, which is really germane right now, is access to COVID vaccines and medications, and we're really thinking beyond price. Price and affordability are really important to that, but we also are thinking about health equity. Who beyond price, who is not does not have access to our products and to our medicines, be it because of geography, socioeconomic status, uh, the built environment in which they are. So, I started off my career in public health, and so I continue to be a public health advocate even within my industry and within my company. So we're always really thinking holistically around health and how folks can access health. So and as it pertains to corporate responsibility and ESG, is we understand that we don't have all the answers to those questions. We believe that communities and stakeholders are sometimes the best source of those solutions. So we partner with nonprofits, we partner with government, we partner with academic institutions to really think about how can we better deliver health for women around the world.
Thank you. And materiality has the virtue of being an actual word and not an acronym. But it still it probably falls into the jargon category. Does anybody want to take a whack at defining materiality?
Or I'd be happy to. And this is a term that actually takes different meanings depending on your perspective or where you sit in the ESG space. So our finance colleagues think about financial materiality as something that may have significant impact to the value creation at your firm, or maybe a significant risk or opportunity for your company. So something that's financially material is not the same as what we say in the ESG space. ESG materiality is an evolving concept, but now I think most people are headed to the concept of dual materiality, which looks at two different dynamics. One is what ESG issues are significantly impacting the value creation at your business. So an example might be natural disasters that may significantly impact the supply chain of your business. So that would be an example of impacting the value creation of your business. The other dynamic, the second piece of dual materiality, is the impact that your business has on ESG issues. So what's your ability to influence the health of the planet, or your ability to influence social issues? And the nice thing about dual materiality, from my perspective, it is much more holistic than traditional definitions. It allows you to think about the interconnectedness. It's the two-way street. It's not solely focused on the business. It's also focused on how you interact with your context. And materiality is actually interesting in that it's point in time. So you'll hear companies talk about doing materiality assessments to set their strategy. And then we actually do what, at least at Salesforce, we call materiality refreshes every year or two to make sure that we're checking in with stakeholders and we're listening to them. And it's a really engaging process. We reach out to customers and suppliers and investors, our employees. We talk to top executives within the company. It's about hearing all these different perspectives, because what an activist NGO might think is most material to your business, the issue they might care about the most, may not match up with what your employee's perspective is or your customer's perspective is.
Byron, you mentioned, and I encourage everyone else to answer if you have answers here too. You mentioned that you did like I forgot what you called it, a materiality map. Is there a particular organization, or is there a particular template that you or any of the others on the panel have found useful to to figure out what your special sauce is?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I think all of us can go into like comparing vendors because there's a lot of folks who are um, popping up in this space, and it's interesting to kind of see how some of the traditional, quote unquote, traditional consulting firms have moved into this space, and it used to be kind of a specialized thing, and now I think everyone has their own approach to materiality. But I think at a very high level, it's asking you looking it's developing a long list of issues that are usually kind of germane to your industry, and then asking your external stakeholders, be it government, the media, customers, suppliers, um, other kind of NGOs, activists, other stakeholders, and then asking your internal stakeholders. We asked a swath of our employees who we call founders, but we also asked our executive leadership team. We also asked our board of directors, and then you kind of go through a process, a little bit art, a little bit of science to kind of really map those issues and see where those tensions are. I think it's a fantastic exercise to understand, like, where Sonia mentioned, like, where's that divergence, like, where activists think you should be taking a stance or really prioritizing this, and it might be vastly different from what your board thinks, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And so it helps you develop your approach to an issue, as well as for us, what's our kind of level of investment or engagement? How much do we want to move the needle on an issue? And I think the one interesting thing about materiality and this, what's happening in real time, is that as Sonia mentioned, the difference between quote unquote ESG materiality and financial materiality, those spaces are coming closer and closer together as, the SEC and other bodies kind of think about broadening the definition of materiality, and they think about the climate risk as material risk. And so it's a really exciting time, and I think we're all watching with bated breath as to, like, where that all levels out. But not for nothing, I think it's a really great exercise, as you said, Sonia, to do it every year, every 2 years, to kind of really check in with your stakeholders to understand how those material issues move over time. We are partnering with our enterprise risk management team to think about risk and kind of embedding ESG into enterprise risk management and seeing how those risks move over time. And we partner with an external firm to help us do that.
That actually, oh, sorry, Dawn, you want to jump in? Please do.
Just very briefly, on a very tactical level, for many corporates, we divide the issues along categories. Internally, we actually tag them with keywords. We at Lincoln have 16 keywords and business departments that we regularly engage with and who are on our materiality matrix. I'll throw a couple out. Obviously, environment, facilities, procurement, diversity, inclusion, ethics, increasingly product is on that. And what you'll see on materiality matrices is high impact, high risk of some of those keywords or issues, and then low impact, low risk. So that's a quick snapshot of a materiality assessment.
Hey, Eric, I would just also add that, making sure you're looking at international standards. There's some great ones out there, like the Global Reporting Index, better known as GRI, that we're new to embarking on this endeavor, started last May, and having those set of standards to build out our material topics and be able to have a roadmap and KPIs as we go forward, I think has been critical. So that and the greenhouse gas protocol are ones that have been strong for us to help us get to where we're at today.
Yeah, and I add in too, we also bump up our materiality assessment against what our competitors are doing. And what are the best practices, right, in the industry that we're seeing. So I think that's another lens to bring in. I think to Byron's point too, it's been interesting over time. We've seen like disaster relief and climate change were two separate things that were tracked. And then you start to see, as you do this, that they're coming together, and employees and stakeholders, right, are seeing those issues converge. So I think that's another, just an interesting way to see trend lines in the work.
So, it sounds like materiality is just simply what matters. And at the beginning of all your sustainability journeys, you've done like formal materiality assessments to figure out what matters and what you need to work on. The Q&A isn't, we still got time before the Q&A, but we're getting a bunch of questions that are really relevant. Byron, you mentioned that you hired a third party or you worked with a third party to help you with yours. Did anyone else work with outside consultants or firms that help an organization define what's important to you and how to achieve your goals?
I would take a guess that all of us do have extra hands. CSR sustainability, is the beg, borrow, and steal team. So we often have to rely on external help for sure.
Eric, I would add,
leading through influence. But
Eric,
yeah.
I'll just also add, it's not just about consultants that you might bring on, but it's partnering, as I think Don is alluding to, with each other. And I can tell you from starting up recently, corporations that are on this call right now, and I'm sure in the audience, were huge helps to us to be able to understand some of the challenges they went through and some of the best practices they had. And it was had us think in a different way to be able to formalize what our plan is now. So I don't think it has to just be a paid consultant or an outside firm in that sense. I think you can look around and I think people are willing to help out because we're all on the same page what we're trying to achieve here.
And it's kind of interesting that, one vendor that we use actually, and I think many are starting to leverage AI for this. So artificial intelligence, more acronym soup, in terms of, there's a lot of soft and hard law now that relates to ESG. And so there's natural language processing tools that are scouring the internet to understand what are the norms, and they might differ among geographies. And so we had, our partner in this helped us understand what the media thinks of our industry, like in China versus what it thinks of it in Latin America, and and so it was really helpful. As you can imagine, sustainability and ESG looks very different in what part of the world that you're talking about. So we're really tracking regulation in Europe that's coming online quite fast versus here in the US. It's a different state and in other parts of the world. So I think there's all these different tools that are popping up seems like every day that kind of help us wrap our hands and arms around ESG across the world.
There was a bit of people were talking at once. I can't remember who said it, but who said the beg, borrow, and steal team? Don. I think it's actually worth extrapolating from that to sort of what's behind that question. I think, which is, where does ESG come from? Is a small team of people sort of charged with coming up with a strategy and executing? Does it come from employees who are interested in this topic and want to see what their company is capable of beyond its primary purpose? Or is it coming from the board and the CEO, in which case everybody is empowered to do this? Like where do you see ESG coming from? And if it's not coming from the top, how do you get it to come from the top?
I'm happy to take a quick cut at this, and I know my peers have plenty to say. For a publicly listed company, there are a number of stakeholders, definitely regulatory. We submit climate information to the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. SEC, as Byron mentioned, is looking at this. We have a bunch of state regulators. So regulation is one. Number two is rating, rankings, and data providers who scrub this information and provide it onto the investment space. Number three is definitely employees. Number four is clients. We're seeing examples of big global multinational corporations asking their vendors to have, GHG commitments. So we're seeing our clients are asking this. We see this in RFPs a lot. And then finally, the big elephant in the room, in a good way, in my opinion, are the investors. They've seen that companies that outperform on ESG outperform in other areas. So they see a company that manages these issues, measures them, and then makes that information transparent as a real advantage to how they calculate, the value of a company. And so for people like me, I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure my peers will smile, ESG disclosure has become a really big piece of our job.
Yeah, it's really filling out forms in a lot of.
It's answering
ways.
questions for sure.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting is that probably all of our companies, it might sit in different departments. It might sit in different functions. I think what's interesting and can be a challenge is, particularly at Organon and other companies I worked at, is that we have an ESG function, but we're not necessarily accountable for it all. Because ESG describes everything that our company does. So we're constantly pulling data from various functions around the world to collect data and understand practices and strategy. Our function is responsible for putting it all together into one kind of cohesive picture, which is definitely a challenge and something that takes we have partners in other areas that help us do that and help pull together. And then our executive leadership team, including our CEO and our board of directors, have oversight over all of it. So we want to make sure that the picture is accurate and comprehensive.
And I think that that's what's so interesting about the moment we're in, because the public discourse around ESG has grown exponentially. I would say the familiarity and the comfort level, the literacy around ESG as a topic, and the understanding that different functional leaders have a role to play is now something that I'll walk into a room with a colleague and I won't have to explain that. I won't have to explain to the head of HR how diversity and inclusion fits into our ESG transparency, and the investors are asking us questions during proxy season about this. It's kind of table stakes knowledge, which didn't used to be the case, 5-10 years ago. And I think what's really exciting is, I know there's a big portion of the audience today, HR focused, is when you go to conferences, my colleagues are saying, the finance team, when they go to finance and accounting conferences, they're talking about these concepts. The real estate folks, when they go to real estate conferences, they're talking about sustainable built environment. So this is exactly the right direction, I think, for the world. This enables us to think about how the sum is greater than the parts. So everyone around the business transforming in a way that collectively moves the company towards this transformation that I mentioned at the beginning, that's so critical to seize opportunities and also mitigate risks.
Okay, I think. I was just going to say really quickly, I think that's right. And I think we're an example of that at the American Red Cross. I think even just a few years ago, I don't think many people would have thought that nonprofits needed to engage in ESG. And some people still might think that way, but we've realized as the private sector all around us is seeing the importance of ESG, that it is really relevant to what we do, and have jumped all in. Our president, our board, our staff, we've had everybody, that's understands the importance of it and put us to where we are today.
So we covered materiality assessments. We've covered the sort of philosophy of the whole space, but are there other concrete resources that you turn to? If people are not as far along their journey as you are, like where do you send them to read or to learn more? Other than from day one webinars, of course, and Bloomberg News.
Just on a very tactical level, our team sends out every week an ESG roundup of articles and news and long form research. to people that are targeted. We work with 70 subject matter experts across the business, and they're on that email distribution list. And it's funny because every time we send that newsletter out, I get questions. So people are attuned to this. It's definitely a hot topic at the moment.
Dawn, it's really
great.
Oh, go ahead, Nicole, please.
Sorry, I just say, Don, we do a similar piece, right? We have a summary internally that's also available externally if folks opt into it. But I think a great resource for anyone is just to go look at the annual sustainability reports of corporations you admire, or corporations that are like yours, or maybe are startups, or wherever you sit in that growth stage of your own company. But those annual reports that everyone on this call works really hard to do, we'd love if more people went in front of. No, I mean, I think they are part of like the investor and the analyst audience go there. We have a rich library of issue briefs we put out as well too, but I know that's a space for even, for folks who are looking to work at your company. They're going there to see what you report out and what you have. So that's a great resource just to see how people are putting it together, what KPIs they put in there. I mean, you can geek out and get pretty wonky on what's there, and see how other folks are putting it together.
I was just going to say that I think these internal communications actually speak to like the name of the conversation today. I mean, this is also how you embed it into your culture, by just kind of putting it in people's inboxes and keeping it top of mind. And I think what's really great about, I think maybe 10 years ago, all of us as ESG and sustainability and CSR professionals had to, bang on doors to get people's attention. Now it's kind of, instead of a push, it's a pull. People want more information about ESG. People want to know what as a company that really has put ESG at the center of our corporate purpose, I have to manage people's expectations around everyone wants to get involved. And I kind of have to say that, actually doing your day job contributes to our ESG goals. But, folks wanted to go above and beyond. And so it's incumbent on me and our department to kind of, spell out some of those opportunities where they can educate themselves around ESG, as well as get involved in contributing to our short and long-term goals. So it really, and I think all these kind of formal and informal communications and activities actually is how you kind of make it sticky into the culture.
Sonia, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
No, I just think that's a really important point. It's something we've been looking at more closely. I know it was brought up earlier around, I think most folks, when they first learn about corporate social responsibility, or they think about it as philanthropy, or it's volunteering in your community, it's giving during your annual pledge campaign, which are all critical pieces of making this work go. But one of the pieces we've been really looking at doing and talking about with our employees, to Byron's point of how do you embed it, is giving examples of how your everyday work, what you're coming in to do every day, is helping to hit our goals. So we've opened up connecting learning centers across the country, embedded in nonprofit partners we work with in communities, but having those centers there for individuals to come in. If they don't have internet at home, they can go there and get their internet, get their schooling for their kids, look for jobs. And we filmed those technicians who were coming in and laying the fiber for those connected learning centers. And it was unscripted, very personal statements around what this meant to them. They lay fiber every day, but what it meant to do it to this community center and where they knew it was going to go and who it was going to help. And oftentimes it's in their communities. And those were really powerful stories, I think, where employees could be like, oh, this isn't about doing something different or doing something in my other time or some other commitment I need to do. Just honestly, by putting fiber out in the world, I'm helping bridge the digital divide. So I think just finding those very tangible pieces that resonate just helps it become less of this other thing, but just it's part of what we all do to hit the purpose of our business.
What about, can each of you talk a little bit more about sort of the Venn diagram of the sustainability group and HR itself? Like, what are literally, how does HR work with CSR groups, and what is the end result for employees?
I can start. One really impactful way that our HR team helps support this work is through employee resource groups. I'm guessing for most of the companies in the audience, you have your flavor of these. They may be called something else. And so we have a group, there are a lot of affinity and identity-based groups, the women's group or ethnic identity groups, but we also have an environmental group that has helped kind of create scale around our net zero commitment and our emissions reductions goals. And then they've been instrumental, as you can imagine, on the DEI side, of course. So helping us really make sure that we're living our equality values. And it's a fine line, right? Because you don't want employees to bear the burden of the work either. You don't want to ask the 2 Black people that work in a function to suddenly be responsible for hitting all of your diversity and representation targets, but employees have to be a critical piece of this work. Another way that HR has been really significant, of course, is on the diversity and inclusion policies. So we call our HR function employee success. Employee success has helped us stand up a racial justice and equality task force focused on how we embed these values across our business, everything from who we choose to do business with on the procurement side and our spending, to our philanthropy, to our public policy work. And we actually have now a specific part of our recruiting group that focuses on diversity hiring. So when you hire as a hiring manager, you're assigned a kind of quote unquote traditional recruiter and an equality recruiter that helps you, again, make sure that everything from your job description to the interview process, to who is on your interview panels and the exercises that you do, to the comp offer, is in line with the values that we espouse around equal pay and inclusion. So I think HR has an incredible role to play, probably first and foremost in the diversity space, but you're setting culture, you're creating the kind of rules of engagement of who we are as a company. And I think that can be overlooked, the critical role that HR has in making sure that we're walking the talk.
Yeah, I think the most obvious places for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and helping kind of, I think we partner on goal setting and target setting, but we also look at, pay equity, which is a hot topic. We're looking at also really expanding the benefits for folks to kind of, again, if our North Star is equity, not only gender, but racial, age, a whole bunch of different dimensions. And so, we're really, and then, we have formal ways of working in terms of reporting. We can just go into data all day, every day with our HR colleagues, but we also try to be brainstorming partners, like what else can we do for our workforce? And then, I think, as Nicole mentioned, we're also looking left and right at our peer set, about what they're doing. And I think, we look beyond our industry as well. We look at tech, which is kind of always doing cool things. So, and so we are, I think we both have a very interest in making the culture as well as the employee experience great. And so I think that's a very natural overlap for both of our departments.
I just make one comment that it was said before, but I think it pertains to this, that, HR is a great partner, as are lots of different corporate units that we have. But to truly embed ESG into our business practices, takes that leadership to instill that that's the direction that we're going to go. And it takes that buy-in from all of our departments and all of our staff. We're unique at the Red Cross in that 97% of the workforce that we have is actually volunteers. And so we can't look at it just from an HR lens. We have to make sure we're looking at it more holistically of all people that we touch, and make sure that we have that full buy-in, especially if you get into things like DE&I that are so critically important for us to deliver our mission.
I would also sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
No, go, Don.
I would just say a very interesting example of external stakeholders that are interested in ESG and are pushing the boundaries and looking around the corner was during COVID. They started asking for metrics around human capital development. So what is HR doing for the benefits and the development and the pure welfare of employees? And the external market started saying your KPIs aren't good enough. you need to get better KPIs on that. We need to know how Lincoln versus Prudential versus MetLife, how do we start to compare how you're developing your employees? And that was a really interesting conversation for us in the ESG CSR space to bring that in and walk that over, because we're doing some great programs. Like, we have excellent stuff and have always been committed to strong human capital development, but we weren't necessarily reporting the way we could be. It was a very interesting moment.
Yeah, I think building on that too, I think HR and CSR have an incredible partnership in employee retention. So we did a joint study with HR, just looking at those employees who engaged in CSR initiatives. They had a higher eNPS, they were better satisfied, they stayed longer in their position. And then we also know that they're much more hired to say that it's a great place to work. So those are really critical, especially when you're looking at the Great Resignation and what all of us are seeing right now. You know, what's the value proposition for employees? The power is definitely swung to the worker versus the employer, right? So I think that's another critical piece that HR can play. I mean, because they're the first stop for employees coming in the door and also for employees exiting, right? So how are you creating that retention and telling that story and telling the purpose of what the company does and how it ties in, and engaging that employee to be that brand ambassador from day one? So I think that's another big area that's exploded.
We're really getting a bunch of questions in the Q&A section here about connectivity and like, really, what are the professional networks that people can reach out to learn about how to do all this? You know, are there informal, are there formal organizations? I mean, you know, there's a lot of you know, sort of hubs. A global reporting initiative, GRI was mentioned earlier. There's CDP was mentioned. There's the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, SASB. But how else can people feel like they're really communicating with you know, professionals who really know ESG but aren't at their company?
I would throw out, I mean, I think an amazing resource for me. So I'm president of our foundation, and I work in our corporate social responsibility group, but don't have direct sustainability reporting. My colleague does that, right? But in this space, so an area for me that's been tremendous is the conference board. I'll make a plug for that as their past chair of the CSR Council, but they have a whole ESG center as part of the conference board. So they have councils that are specific to ESG. They have ones that are on philanthropy and engagement. They have ones around more CSR, and they're designed for kind of your senior level folks in this space. And so other people who are part of that council, that's been an incredible resource for me. I mean, it's a membership. You do pay to be in that, and you pay to be in the council. But once you're part of a center, your whole team also has access to that information. And so there's, you know, weekly, monthly calls that I can pull my colleagues into, my team, just to learn and connect with other folks in this space. And that's been a really rich resource.
I would say inside corporates in particular, I've always relied on volunteers. And I recognize people have their day jobs, but when they have a personal interest in any of these issues that we all cover, environment, philanthropy, diversity and inclusion, there's always work to be done. And if someone has an extra couple hours a week and wants to help, we will absolutely take them on. And a number of those people in my space, in my history, have gone on to take on CSR jobs at other companies. So I think just getting involved and learning up on these issues is definitely the first step.
Another organization I would throw out there is Business for Social Responsibility, BSR, which I don't think has a cap on how many people in your company can really participate. And they have, I think, very similar to the conference board, they have different kind of working groups on specific issues. And they have an annual conference, which has been impacted by COVID, like and there's like there's a flurry of conferences also in this space, and you can there's kind of general sustainability ones, there's corporate philanthropy ones, there's ones that are very kind of issue specific. So I kind of good Google search will kind of help you kind of navigate the space. But I think the conference board and BSR are really good starting points.
We haven't talked that much about the E specifically, or the well, in an hour, how much you're going to cover really. But what about the E? What about climate change? Hundreds, if not thousands, of companies have set themselves the goal of getting rid of carbon dioxide pollution by mid-century. How do you internalize that global quest, and how do you make that? How do you let individuals at the firm feel like they're a part of that, other than saying, no, you can't fly to Europe for a week?
So Eric, I can take that one first. I probably have the easiest answer though, because it's directly part of our mission. You know, for us, climate change isn't just a problem for tomorrow. I mean, we're already addressing the now effects of climate change at the Red Cross. For years, we've been sheltering, feeding, giving financial assistance, mental health and hope for people that are affected by climate change. And that support's becoming more critical as families across the country are affected by larger and more devastating natural disasters. So just if you look at the largest of those disasters, the $1 billion disasters, there's a 6 times increase since the 1980s on the largest of disasters that are occurring. And so that means more people are needing our help. More people are forcing their homes due to those climate-related disasters and becoming a chronic challenge. So we see firsthand the impact of climate change with the people that we're supporting. And that really motivates us to ensure that we reduce our environmental footprint, that we work with partners and suppliers to reduce their environmental footprint. So as our organization's focused on making sure that we can continue to provide our mission both today and tomorrow.
Go ahead, Don, sorry.
On a very basic level, kind of simplified level, there are almost accounting standards in what's called the GHG protocol that identifies how you measure your GHG emissions. And then there's quite a bit of guidance from Paris Agreement related topics and organizations. Science-Based Target Initiative is starting to become, if it isn't already, one of the best in class standards and frameworks, and that guides us. We just set new targets last year, and it's in line with science-based targets and in line with the Paris Agreement goals. So there is a science around what we should be doing to reduce our footprint as a corporation.
Climate change already hits disadvantaged communities disproportionately. How do you account for making sure that the communities you serve that are hit disproportionately are helped disproportionately?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think people get confused sometimes that you can focus in on a particular issue, your pet issue, and that'll really advance the world. And I think the UN did us a great service by talking about the global sustainability development goals, sustainable development goals, and they illustrated how interconnected all these things are. So you're not going to solve climate without solving injustice issues around the world. You're not going to tackle poverty without tackling access to clean energy. And so it's got to be a critical piece of the conversation. Something that Salesforce has been looking at is how does technology come into the picture? Because we think, selfishly from the technology sector, as a tech company, we think technology is going to help us scale solutions. We have a lot of great solutions available to us, but we're not acting fast enough. There's urgency that the climate science is showing us that we need to act now. So we're looking at how technology can do that, our own technology, but also investing in what we call ecopreneurs. So folks who maybe don't traditionally have access to startup capital, who are diverse, who have a lived experience to contribute to the space. They're amazingly ingenious, intelligent folks all around the world. It's not just in the US and California that we can find the next solution to climate.
Great. There's a question about startups in ESG that I think, Byron, you probably want to take a bite out of that. And then another just about ESG as a skill set and how much you can develop talent internally versus hiring people who have picked up expertise elsewhere.
Yeah, I think, we're not a typical startup. We're a startup at scale. We spun off of Merck and we were 9,000 employees across 140 markets. And so we're not necessarily, working on a shoestring and trying to build everything from scratch. But that being said, I think it's a great question. I think to think about ESG from inception, and you kind of see what like from another perspective. I see venture capital and private equity moving into this space really fast to kind of have to set those expectations of their portfolio companies. And so even if I think all of us are public companies and like the kind of external pressure is a little bit higher for us, but I think private companies and new companies are prioritizing this, and not necessarily for the investor community, but for their own employees. I think one of our big stakeholder groups are our employees, and they have sometimes higher demands and increasing expectations that are beyond our own investor community. And so there's an interest in again proving out that you are a mission driven, purposeful company. Employees want to know that they're working for a reputable, ethical company. And so it's us as ESG professionals to kind of provide that data to really help prove that out.
Eric, I'll just add, Nicole said earlier, go, what do you aspire to be? Go look for other people's annual ESG reports. I think that there's such great information out there. You can Google and find pretty much anything that you want. But if you go look at these companies put a lot of great work into their plans and what they have in place. And it's a great starting point. And I'd really recommend to start with either peer type organizations or size or somebody you aspire to be. And looking at all the different ones, I think you'll find a great starting point.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Just to riff on your question around skill set to the HR professionals on the call. In my experience, which is longer than I'm willing to admit, it is a project management job. Things change all the time. We have new initiatives, we have new skills we have to learn, we have new information we have to absorb, and then translate that out. So at the end of the day, I would say sustainability and CSR are project management jobs. And then secondly, they're change management jobs. We have to advocate, work with, steer, brief, things to move the ship in the right direction. So anyone with those skills, I think, would succeed in this space.
A couple quick, we only have 2 minutes left. I've been keeping track of the organizations that have been mentioned. Sonia put Salesforce's sustainability report into the chat. I'll ask from day one to sort of get this list out to people. Then for maybe a speed round to wrap up on is, it's no surprise that the U.S. has had less bumpy days. There's a lot of talk about norms eroding, norms changing, but is sustainability and ESG like the source for norms for the future? Like if everybody adopted ESG, if the U.S. government said, all right, we're just going to run the country like a company and we're going to have national ESG reporting and standards, is I guess the question is ESG going to save the whole world here?
I'll kind of say something maybe it's a little controversial. Like ESG is kind of a laggard. It's kind of a lagging indicator of where things happen. I think, folks look at SASB and GRI and the accounting standards, but those kind of come out of a lot of consultation with, and actually, with the activist community, who are kind of pushing issues. In some way, ESG is a reaction to things that are happening in the street and kind of public discourse. And so I kind of sometimes say I'm an internal activist inside my own company to just say, like, how do we ESG is kind of a framework, but how do we go beyond it as well? Because I'm trying to think about what is our impact on the world and society. And I think we're kind of moving in the right direction, but I kind of say, don't let ESG, I think ESG is a starting out point. It's not the end point.
Okay, we got to wrap up after Dawn here delivers the final invocation.
Yeah, thanks for
No
that.
pressure, Don.
Yeah, right. I think what we're doing in this space is trying to measure and monitor impact. So societal impact, environmental impact of a corporate. How do we measure that? How do we know those measurements are right? And then how do we move them along? I think that process of accountability and transparency could translate to the wider world.
Great. Positive note to end on, and I'll hand it back to Steve to wrap up. Thanks everyone for participating.
Indeed, great place to wrap it all up. Thanks to Eric and all of our speakers for so many fresh insights and explaining your terms and acronyms too. I think we all learned something today, no matter our level of expertise. Thanks again to our sponsor, Salesforce, and to all of you for participating today. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromday1.co, and check out more of our upcoming webinars. I'll tell you about 3 really quickly here at the end. Next Tuesday, February 1st, making benefits work for women in your workplace is our topic. Next Thursday, February 3rd, we'll be talking about how employers can support workers in their caregiving roles, not just childcare. And Tuesday, February 15th, we'll be talking about making healthcare more inclusive for all your employees. Thanks, everyone. Stay well. Bye for now.